When you move to the other side of the world, can you really shake off the mundane aspects of life that are inevitable in day-to-day living? How far are you prepared to go to start to live a new type of lifestyle and push yourself out of your own comfort zone? Well, today we're talking to Sean and Lucinda, who traded village life in Lancashire for city life on the Sunshine Coast. But when they figured out that that wasn't the type of Australia that they were looking for, they sold up everything to buy a caravan and see what awaited them on the open road doing a lap of Australia. What adventures would await them and their 3 young children, and what challenges would they face in quitting their jobs, breaking their kids out of school, and living life on the open road? What can we learn from their experience? I guess we'll find out. G'day, Sean and Lucinda. How are you going?
Hi, good, thank you.
How is van life?
Hot at the moment.
Yeah,
we're
as
up
you
in
can
Darwin.
tell.
It's pretty warm, but good. Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say chilled. We've got 3 kids and it's full on, but it's fun. It's all good.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, so that everyone understands you and where you've come from, could you give us an idea of what your life was like before you ended up, even in Australia, in a van? I'm sure people are going to be wondering, where did we start and how did we get to a van? What was your life like back in the UK?
Easier. So Sean was working full-time as a teacher. We're from Lancashire, near Preston.
Yeah.
Nice life, straightforward.
Yeah, I think we had the children relatively young.
Yeah.
It felt like by the time we were 30, we'd established the whole good job, nice house, steady life, really, I suppose. And it was more that encouraged us to change it all and flip it on its head and think, well, we're 30, we don't want to be doing this for the next 50 years. Let's go and do something else, really.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had a bit of a stable life living in Lancashire. Was there any kind of tipping point then that made you think, do you know what, this is enough for me, let's try something new?
Anything dramatic, was it?
No, I think that's almost the hardest part of it, is we can explain how we got here and what we did, but why, I don't really know. It was just a point of, I suppose one element was with my job and my career, I was sort of pushing middle management level, really, and I looked at maybe applying for some headships or deputy headships, and then realised actually, I went through the interview process for one and then realised it wasn't really what I wanted, because it would mean less family time, less time with the children. So we sort of thought, right, well, we need to rethink our priorities a little bit, really.
That sounds very familiar to me. One, because also I'm a teacher as well, and I was getting to that stage in my career of what's after middle leadership, if you like. And I had a bit of a life epiphany really early on in my career. When I first started teaching, I actually wanted to be a pilot, and I applied for the British Airways Future Pilots program. And I got through my aptitude test, which was kind of a shock to me because I'd never thought I'd be able to do that anyway. My maths is terrible and there's lots of maths. And I was at the interview stage and they asked me, why do you want to be a pilot? And I said, because I'd like to travel the world. I'd like to see different parts. And I think that, and this was the most important bit, and I think that being a pilot will allow me to live in different parts of the world. And he looked at me funny. And then I started looking at him thinking, why are you looking at me funny, old man? And he said, you do realise that if you're ever a pilot with British Airways, you're going to live within 30 miles of Heathrow. Yeah. And it kind of dawned on me and I went, you're absolutely right. No, I'll get to see a lot of the world. I might get to travel there. But if my goal is to live in different parts of the world, I'm not going to achieve that. And I think teaching ended up being the career that has facilitated that the most.
Yeah. No, we'd looked at kind of different opportunities, kind of teaching in international schools and British schools, but it was just never quite what we wanted to do or where we wanted to be. And for some reason, Australia would just never really come up, hadn't it? It wasn't really something that we talked about. And then one day it just came up and we realised that we would be able to get permanent residency because Sean's a teacher.
Yeah.
What do you do, Lucinda?
Well, not a lot at the moment. I had 3 children pretty young. All my qualifications are in early years and psychology. So I've done bits of work with all that in the past. But that was the other thing. Like with Sean working full-time as a teacher and us having 3 children, it never really felt like there was any time for me to do anything else. Somebody's got to be there when the kids are ill and whatever else. And teachers just don't have a lot less flexibility than what people think they do.
Did you work in the UK?
I was working in nurseries, and then when we had our youngest, he's only 2.5, that's when I stopped completely, really. So yeah, and then that last year, my main role was getting us here, doing all the visa paperwork, sorting the house, getting everything ready. And we just did it quite quickly, didn't we?
So with your whole applying for visas and migrating over here, if you were the one in charge, was there any unexpected hurdles or anything, any nice surprises actually with that whole process? Because I'm assuming you did it yourself?
Yeah,
Well,
we did it more ourselves than I think a lot of people do. We didn't get sponsored.
No, we used an agent, which was smooth, although I think in hindsight we probably didn't need to. I think as a teacher, it's quite straightforward. But at the beginning of the process, you don't know, do you? You don't know what you're going to be dealing with. But no, it was all quite straightforward. I think the stress of the visa process is that you don't know. Until you've got the visa, you've no idea how long it's going to take until literally the day that you get it. So, and we kind of jumped the gun a little bit in that we'd already booked flights, we were going. So it was a relief when the visas came through in time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were lucky. It was all quick and straightforward, really.
I think
what visa did you get in the end?
Sorry. The only thing for me was that there was a English language skills test that you've got to do. And my background is English. I've got a degree in English, but I was stressed about it.
It's more of a pride issue. There was no problem.
But if you ace it effectively, you do get more points towards your application. So there was that extra pressure. But actually, it was fine. And the only reason I mention it is because if there was ever anybody in that position, once I'd done it and come out of it, I thought, yeah, there was no need to stress because I'm a native English speaker. And that's really all it's checking, is that your language is good enough. So yeah, there was a lot of unnecessary stress, I think, with that.
Which test did you do?
The PTE one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you choose that one in particular for any reason?
We were told that it was easier to do well on than the other one. I can't remember. There is another one. I can't remember the name.
IELTS. That's the one I did.
Yeah. We were told that was more pen to paper. I don't know whether that's right. Whereas the PTE.
I mean, I don't know. All I remember was it was a long 3 hours where they're not allowed to go to the toilet just in case you start cheating. I found when I did it, I mean, my background isn't in English. It's geography. I found just being a teacher and having a background in understanding how exams work and, trying to think what is it that they could be looking for. Even if I was to give 3 basic tips to anyone doing those English tests, it would be, yes, absolutely remember that you are a native speaker, but don't try and talk in the usual conversational language that you have. What do we say to the kids? It's an exam, so try to show off. So speak a bit slowly and think about, is this the best word or is this the best word that I could use to show off my vocabulary? Even that one, vocabulary, just trying to do those types of things and just trying to continue doing that through across all of the different exams. So when it comes to the speaking bit, it's quite hard sometimes to remember, hang on a minute, I need to think of fancier words here, but it's sometimes easier when you're writing it down. And then the last one, I was expecting, I don't know how the PTE was, I was expecting the listening test to be a bit like when we did French or German or whatever at school, where essentially you read the question and you go and think, okay, dog, I'm listening for the word chien, and that's all I need to listen for. Whereas when I did the IELTS one, you'd look at what the question is, and then you're starting to listen. You're thinking, this has got nothing to do with the question. I found it quite difficult to, find the hidden meanings sometimes between that bit. Was it the same in the PTE?
Yeah, a little bit. Like you say, I think understanding the structure of it and what they're looking for really helped. So I did a lot of research and watched some videos. I got an app that let you go through the questions, and then I could see almost like the algorithm and the structure to it, and played around with it. And it was literally elements where you repeat certain keywords and you get more points, and just little tricks like that where if you can remember those when you go in, you can do well.
There was one where I think the section was called describe an image, but the questions always seem to be a graph or a table of information. Instinctively, as a teacher, probably the thought process was that you're supposed to sort of infer something from the data that's in front of you and make some sort of conclusions, whereas actually all they want you to do is describe the image.
So
literally.
Because I wasn't going to say this, but I got 100% on it because I very anally went over the whole test about 1 million times. And for that, the way to do it was to literally say on the x-axis, it goes up from 0, 10, 20, 30, and then on the y-axis, it's got such a thing, and there is a blue bar that goes up, and literally describing it. And actually, when I tried to analyze it in my practices, I got a terrible score because I wasn't using any those key words. Yeah,
The
that would
command
be
word's
my
not asking you to do that, it's asking you to describe it.
Yeah.
Well, again, there's probably thousands of kids at GCSE that can't get their command words right and do exactly the same problems. It's, sometimes we overthink things a little bit too much, particularly when we're stressed trying to get the maximum amount of points.
Yeah.
Some people are probably going to be thinking to themselves watching this, you're not on holiday necessarily, you're in the front of your caravan. I guess, how long have you been in Australia so far, and kind of what's led you to where you are?
Yeah, this was never the plan.
No.
So when we came over, actually on the way here, I got offered a permanent job. So our original plan was to settle on the sunny coast. We rented a house that was quite expensive to rent. Got the job, got the children into school, bought all the uniform, did all of that stuff. I think partly the reason we moved to Australia is because we didn't want to just settle down and live the settled life. So as soon as we started to settle, we thought actually it just feels like we're back in England almost. We're just doing the routine of the week and we want something different. So we basically undid everything that we'd spent the last 6 weeks doing. So I handed in my notice. We took the children out of school. We packed up everything we'd bought into another container.
Not the way to do any of this.
No. And then looked into buying a caravan and then a car that could pull a caravan.
Yeah. So you ended up doing 2 terms, didn't you?
Yeah.
But we knew pretty early into the first term that we weren't going to be doing it. Oh my God.
It's very windy all of a sudden.
Our awning is about to fall.
Oh no.
Right, it's okay. John's going to sort it. So, so that's what we decided really. I think we arrived on the Sunshine Coast about last October and then we set off travelling at the beginning of July. So we'd had about 8 months on the Sunshine Coast.
So yeah, where were we there?
No, just trying to fix down your awning. I know what it's like when the wind picks up. Have you got one of those anti-flap kits?
Well, we thought we did.
It says anti-flap. It doesn't really stop it from flapping. I think it just stops the thing from taking off and getting ripped off the side of your caravan.
Yeah.
Well, that's always
more the thing. So it sounds like Australia wasn't necessarily what you'd imagined it to be when you first came here. Like you're saying that it seemed very much like living back in the UK. I found it really interesting. I spoke to another guest and they were saying that the mundane life of day-to-day living doesn't escape you just because you've moved to the other side of the world.
Yeah.
So it sounds like perhaps that's the bit that you wanted free of rather than the...
I think it was both things, wasn't it? And until we were here, we didn't really know what we were wanting. But I think, once we got back into that day-to-day routine here, we just knew straight away, didn't we, that wasn't what we were here for. And because Sean and the kids finished school at the end of like the previous academic year in the July, we'd already had about 6 months out travelling, doing our own thing. Yeah, we were probably a bit spoiled at that point, weren't we?
Yeah.
And I think once you've had that time to yourself, you really just resent anybody having any more of your time.
So how does travelling Australia then compare to doing it back in the UK?
Better weather.
Yeah.
Helps.
I'd say, well, we didn't actually travel certainly like this in the UK. But I think the reason we came to Australia in the first place was to spend more time with the children and have that family balance, but also to be outdoors and experiencing nature and the world and giving them those experiences. And it is just amazing over here for that. Our youngest, Robin, is 2. We went to swim in, what was it yesterday?
Berry Springs.
Berry Springs, which is like a sort of natural
swimming hole.
Yeah, and it's just the way he walks around as if it's just so normal that is where you just go swimming on a Thursday afternoon or whatever.
It's not like the leisure centre on a Saturday, is it? It's just, off to the swimming hole in the Northern Territory. Watch out for crocs. Like, yes, please.
I think that's every expat's nightmare, isn't it? Really, hearing about all the horror stories moving to Australia, snakes, spiders. We can hold out for the crocodiles. Just don't go to certain places, and there you are living your best lives with your 2-year-old.
The snakes and spiders I can live with. You don't really see them as much as what people think you do. I don't think. I kind of feel like
you've got to go out your way.
Yeah, I'm sure there's snakes everywhere if you wanted to go poking around for them, but I don't choose to do that. And then crocodiles. We're up in the Northern Territory at the minute, and yes, there's crocodiles. You don't just go swimming in water anywhere. You go swimming where there's rangers with croc nets and checking. And up here we're at the end of the dry season, so at this point, if nobody's seen a croc yet, then there's not not a crock, but I'm not sure I'd risk it at the beginning of the dry season.
No.
Yeah.
What's the plan then? So you've gone from the sunny coast and you started in July. So you spent a few months getting up to the northern territory. How has that been so far?
Yeah, it's again, very varied with what you get. So we just sort of take it as it comes, really. So there's certain places we've arrived at and intended to stay for longer and cut it short. And then there's places where we've intended to stay for not very long and stayed a bit longer, really. I suppose at the start it was related to my work quite a lot. Because I was doing relief teaching in Queensland, it just meant that basically we were going to bigger towns or areas where there was quite a lot of schools. That was the main factor to start with, I suppose. And then,
the online teaching has made life more flexible in that sense, hasn't it? That we can obviously do that anywhere.
Yeah.
That's going to help. There's like enormous demand for relief teachers in Queensland. There was just work everywhere, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think that's something or a sort of myth to debunk as well is I know they're asking for teachers and saying there's a teacher shortage, but I know when we were moving over, there was a few comments that people put online saying things like, oh, there's not as much work as you think there is, or actually we don't need any more teachers. What I would say is, yeah, they definitely do. It was tricky to get the job I got because it was at a really good, prestigious school. But actually, since I left there, I've had job offers without even applying or really showing much interest. In terms of relief teaching and things, every town we went to, I was getting multiple calls every morning saying, can you come into such a school? So anyone that wanted to do either, find a permanent job or temporary jobs, there's just so much to do if you're flexible and
Well, if living the nomad lifestyle is for you and you want to experience that in Australia, but you don't know where to start, then you need to speak to the sponsors of our podcast, True Blue Migration Services. Speak to them now and mention us, and for free, they'll tell you exactly what you need to do to move to this beautiful country. Submit your CV or resume and tell them all about yourselves and your family situation, and for free, they'll be able to assess what visas are appropriate for you. Try out their services, and if you do decide to use them, because you've mentioned us, you'll save an additional $200 off the cost of your visa. Maybe that could buy you some fuel to start your own lap of Australia, discovering it for yourself. But if you don't speak to True Blue Migration Services today, you might never find out whether moving to Australia is something that you could do. I was going to say then, how has van life impacted your kind of overall career and professional growth? But it seems like what I'm hearing is the work is there. You could do it, but perhaps you're not motivated or driven by that anymore.
Yeah, no, it's hard because partly the reason we're traveling is to actually find a spot in the country where we want to settle down. So I suppose at that point I'd be looking at schools and jobs and things around there. But no, as a teacher as well, I worked in England at a really good school that was quite a small school, and they had a lot of faith in the teachers to do what they thought the class needed, and the results were really, really good. And then when I was here, it was a great school and really good results as well, but it was very prescriptive. So as a professional, that wasn't really what I wanted. And actually, I also felt like a sort of one-size-fits-all model just isn't as effective. So with my online tailored teaching, it gives me that enjoyment of thinking, right, this is the problem or the challenge, this child that has such an issue and struggles to concentrate with this, but really enjoys such a thing. How can I put all that together and get the best outcome? So I suppose I'm still getting that enjoyment from teaching that maybe I've not had for a while. It's on a smaller scale, but actually I think probably the most effective teaching is one-to-one. And it's a bit of a luxury, but when you do get that, you can make amazing progress and really nice connection with the children. And
Tell us more about your online teaching then. So is that something that you've started doing since being in Australia?
And it wasn't something I'd really considered before. And again, it was partly out of necessity that I knew we'd be traveling and I knew I needed something flexible. But it also fit with, those beliefs and ideas that I've got, really, that it should be really focused on the individual, and that actually something out of a textbook or an online resource that is just made for the masses is never going to be as effective, whether the child is above or below or exactly where they need to be. So I set up tailored teaching, it's called, and that's the idea, really, that it tailors it to meet the needs of the individuals. And I just thought it was quite a unique spin on it, really, that I'm not saying this is exactly what I'm going to deliver. It's quite more creative. It's let's talk about it and come up with something together that is really, really precise and will do something quite efficiently, really. Yeah, it's good fun so far. In terms of the Wi-Fi connections and signal and all of that stuff, that poses challenges, and even having the children in the caravan and whatever. But so far, so good. It's it's been really positive feedback, and it's going really well.
One of the biggest things that I get asked very frequently is from people concerned about teaching quality in general in Australia. And the most common question is, should I put my kids into private schooling, or is state schooling okay? And it's a really difficult question to answer, really. I think there's this general assumption that teaching in Australia, particularly in state schools, isn't that good, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think that you can get bad schools in private or public education. It doesn't necessarily matter. It's just dependent upon that school. But I think that there is definitely a market in Australia if you are interested in, the outcomes of your children and helping them and wanting them to get the best out of their education. And again, I think sometimes there's this stereotype that people don't care about education in Australia. Well, they've got to, when I think I read a statistic the other day that Australia is the country that spends the most on private education than any other developed country in the world. So if more people are doing that, whether it's because of accessibility or not, I think there's definitely a market in parents caring about their education of their kids. So I think, something like your service that you're providing is perfect in Australia, because there's got to be lots of people that are looking for that little bit extra to help their kids in learning. Do you just do it in Australia?
Open to the UK as well, because part of the model or the idea is that actually I can help people with the transition. So something else I offer, there is children in the UK that I've taught in the past and that I can tutor in the early hours of the morning or late at night, but also that idea of maybe a family saying, we're going to move to Australia, how can you help us prepare for their curriculum, all the other way. I suppose going back to the different schools in Australia and the public, private, you've got Catholic ed as well, which is really big. I think it is just a mix. There's some brilliant teachers I've met in all different ones. I think it's as much down to area as well. There has been some schools I've been to which have been pretty tough, and the teacher's main job is to keep the children there and from hurting each other. And that isn't, as a teacher, the most fun, and I wouldn't particularly want my children at that school. But then equally, there are state schools that are absolutely brilliant and very modern in the way they're approaching it. But I'd say the Catholic system is a really nice in-between. It's not got the maybe slight elitist thing of the private schools, but also it just has slightly higher expectations for the teachers and the children maybe than what I've seen in the state system. Then that's definitely somewhere I'd like to explore a bit more. I think coming from the UK, I just assumed I'm personally not a Catholic, and to work in a Catholic school in the UK, you have to be very, very committed to that. But it isn't the same system here. It is obviously a big, important part of what they are, but there's much more flexibility about let's get the right people in, and if they're happy to contribute to our ideologies, I suppose, then we're happy with that.
Well, I guess if you are looking to make the move, or you're in Australia or the UK and you just want an extra bit of help for your children, check out Tailored Teaching. I'll put a link down in the description for anyone that's interested. And it sounds, Sean, that you're one of those teachers that actually really wants to make a difference. And I guess towards the end of my teaching career in the UK and how difficult teaching was in the UK, it was getting harder and harder to find people so motivated, really, because it just kind of wears and grinds you down.
Yeah.
I think that's the point that you were getting to as well, wasn't it? It was getting just hard every day, every week. It just felt like a slog. And I think actually this tailored teaching has kind of brought back some of your passion for teaching as well, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's really focused in on what you want to be doing as a teacher without a lot of the other stuff that comes with schools that teachers aren't actually that interested in.
I think just education as a whole system, or particularly state education, it's probably underfunded largely across the world, but also it's a system where you're saying, well, this is the perfect way to teach a child, but then times that by 30, take away some of the resources that you've got access to, and it dilutes really quickly from a really effective model. So just trying to get back to that, I suppose, is what's giving me the excitement at the minute.
Every child is different.
Yeah.
Lucinda, have you had any experiences so far being in Australia that have made you think, now I live in Australia? This is very Australian.
Well, yeah, we've just spent the last 2 weeks driving through very rural, remote, outback communities, haven't we?
Yeah.
And I think I said to you at one point, didn't I? I said, I feel like we're seeing a side of Australia now that a lot of Australians haven't even seen. People that have lived in Melbourne or Sydney their whole life, have they seen that real, that stereotypical outback Australia? I don't think a lot of them have. So I feel like I'm really happy for our kids that say we stay here forever and they grow up Australian, they've seen that side of life here.
Yeah, and even I think you said the other day that if you meet somebody and they say, oh, I'm from such a place or such a state, you can at least place that a little bit more when you've been somewhere near. I suppose in the UK, you've always got that, you know, the geography roughly, whereas to learn it as you go is nice.
Yeah. And I think that the travel is acclimatizing the children quicker as well. Like our 7-year-old, he's one of those that goes through life a little bit oblivious to most things that are going on around him, but is really picking up on like the geography, isn't he? So you'll say things like, oh, so when do we next get to a beach without stingers? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, you probably know better than I do. There's lots of stingers up here. You can't swim in the sea at all in the Northern Territory.
Nah.
So that's how
Stingers or crocs or sharks, take your pick.
Yeah, there's always going to be one of them. So yeah, they're already sort of getting those ideas, aren't they? They know what you can do where and how the different states vary and what life is like here for other communities that aren't living on the Sunshine Coast in a suburb. And I think it's good. They're seeing a massive variety of everything, aren't they?
Yeah.
And you said about meeting people or on the road and things like that. How have you gone about building a social circle up for yourselves? Because that is, again, a big challenge for people when they move over here, not knowing anyone, not having anyone to rely on, but you know, you're off. How do you go about maintaining connections?
That is a struggle, and I think that is probably the biggest struggle for a lot of new expats. What I found, and I don't want to sort of generalise, but generally Australians, if they've grown and lived here their whole lives, they already have friends. They don't necessarily want new friends. And I think that's fair enough of anybody. You know, people tend to have a quota of how many friends they want in their life, how many people you can cope with communicating with. So generally you end up being friends with people in similar situations to yourself. Not exclusively, but that does often seem to be the case. And plus you can talk about the different issues of being a new expat that until you're in this situation you don't really appreciate some of the stresses. But travelling has changed that again, hasn't it?
Yeah, thank goodness.
It's very windy.
Caravan's taking off again.
Yeah, I think that decision to leave my job and pull the children out of school, that was a real turning point because we were just making friends there and starting to settle. And that, again, was a conscious decision of, do we do that or do we risk losing that for now? And we've met other families along the way while we've been travelling that we keep bumping into at different caravan sites and things, and that's really nice. It's actually really nice for the children to be pushed out of the comfort zone, to have to go and meet new people all the time. And I suppose there's ups and downs to it all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be, I wouldn't say lonely, but you do not have that social element when you're traveling because, you're moving on. So everything is fleeting and then... Yeah.
It's like we met a family a few weeks ago and the kids really got on and our elder said, oh, when will we next see them? And they're going the opposite way around to us. Well, we met them...
Could be a long time then, mate.
They're heading down the East Coast and we're going west. And I was like, I don't know. We might not ever see them again, you know, so...
I think it's important as well for everyone, not just children, to learn to be comfortable with yourselves and, you know, your own kind of family unit, and not to have to rely on extended family, extended friends. I mean, the worst situation, I guess, for everyone is the fact that you're going to be on your own sometimes, and learning to be okay with that, and, you know, understanding that it's a temporary thing. Hopefully it won't be necessarily for too long, or if it is for as long as you want, it's your choice. And then learning those skills to, you know, hey, I mean, kids do it so well, don't they? Just some random... Aurora comes home from school all the time. I made a new friend today. And I'm like, okay, who are they? And I don't know. They just make friends and don't even know what their names are.
Yeah. Well, it was sort of a conscious decision when we talked about it, didn't we? That right now they're in school, they're seeing the same kids, they've got the sports teams and all that side of things. And to our 7-year-old George especially, that's really important. That is a big part of his life. He wants to do every sport going. And at some point he's going to have to go back to that because that's what absolutely loves. But at the minute, they're not getting those experiences, but they're getting a whole other set of experiences instead. And you can't do everything. You can't have everything all at once. And at the minute, this is what we're choosing for them.
Yeah, and they seem pretty happy with it, and they've adjusted pretty well to it.
Yeah, they're having a good time, aren't they? So, just got to...
Let's talk about finances, because you said earlier, you were renting in the Sunshine Coast. It was a very expensive place to rent. How are the finances now on the road in comparison to when you were living in a regular house?
Well, it was tight then, and it's still tight now.
Yeah.
But we're not working full time. So, I think we've said all along that if we do this longer term, then it's going to take us a while to get to the point where it feels comfortable, but we're sort of making it work, aren't we, in the meantime?
Yeah, and prioritising different things and cutting back on different things. But again, I think, like we've just said, that's a choice, and it might be that, a few years ago we could go out for dinner or buy the children ice creams every time we saw somewhere, and now they can't do that, but actually when they do get an ice cream, they probably appreciate it more. So, I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, but it has.
Have there been any financial surprises that you've encountered?
Well, there's always something going wrong with the Caravan.
Yeah.
Like, always.
What's the most expensive thing that's gone wrong so far?
Well, probably having to replace the batteries,
both
of the batteries, and then I tried to install them myself and made a bit of a mistake of it and nearly set the Caravan on fire, nearly set myself on fire. So then we had to pay for an auto electrician. So that all in all was pretty expensive. I'd say fuel is the big one though, isn't it? Just the constant, because obviously you're travelling. When you're not travelling and you're stationary, you're not spending much on fuel. But as soon as you say, right, let's move on, or let's do this, or actually we're not enjoying this place, let's go somewhere else, it's weighing up, well, that could be $300 worth of fuel to get us there.
How much more expensive is fuel where you are in comparison to living in the sunny coast? Is it more expensive?
Well, here in Darwin at the minute, I think I just paid $1.71 a litre, so that was pretty good. But then some in like remote areas in the outback, I think at one point we were paying $2.40. Which was, when you've got a 6-hour drive ahead, that's like, that was horrible, wasn't it?
They definitely have a seller's market out there, don't they?
Oh, yeah. You drive past some fuel stations and it says last fuel 300 kilometres. So you can pay our $2.40 or you can die at the side of the road. That's your choice.
Yeah. Especially as it starts to get into summer as well in the Northern Territory. It won't take too long with that heat.
No, exactly.
Have there been any other surprises on the road other than financially?
Not really. I mean, we just take it as it goes. We've not got many expectations of life, so it doesn't give you many surprises.
I think last week or the last couple of weeks was the first time we were travelling with no signal whatsoever, so no access to the outside world. Even for things like maps, we had to go back to your paper
physical
maps.
We've not done for a while.
So that was, it's hard to predict when those things are going to happen either, so we travelled not knowing that. And then, it was nice to have a few days away, and we had to try and contact people at home and say, listen, if you don't hear from us for a few days, we're okay. But
what safety precaution things do you have, for when you are doing these long stretches and there isn't any signal?
Well, technically our car's got a radio, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think either of us know how to work that. We'd have to work out how to work the radio if we needed it.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll never have to use it.
I suppose our phones, when we're out of signal, do have a sort of SOS signal enough to call someone.
Yeah. My dad actually asked on the phone last night, he said, went on these like really, quiet roads, how often do you see somebody? And I was thinking about it, I think it must be no less than every 20 minutes or something like that, isn't it?
And it's almost always a caravan.
If you were really stuck, it's either a caravan or a trucker comes past. So you're never that far from civilization. I mean, you are by British terms, but...
I think one reassuring part is that we are in Australia. Australians, a general rule, I would say, are so welcoming and helpful, and will be more than happy to say, right, I'm going to have to give up half an hour of my day to pull over and help you change this tyre or whatever. And that whole sort of no worries, it really doesn't matter. I don't even think they like you saying thank you. The amount of times I've said, thank you very much. No, don't worry about it. So that is reassuring. I think there's parts of Britain or maybe Europe where you'd think, well, if we do see a car in 20 minutes, there's a chance they'll just drive on past and even maybe laugh at us as we go. Whereas you just wouldn't get that in Australia.
Yeah, especially I find the more remote, I mean, I've not been anywhere nearly as remote as you, but even, where we are, when we go to like the Sunshine Coast hinterland kind of bits, the minute you start getting out of the really populated urban areas, it's not to say that Australians that live in those places aren't friendly, but it's just like a whole nother level of friendliness.
Yeah.
So I guess, with you guys going even more remote, I don't know, perhaps sometimes people are just happy to see someone else.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah.
Maybe that's a little bit of it.
Kids had to learn that a little bit as well, haven't they? Because our kids are both quite, not shy, but a little bit introverted around people they don't know. And we've had to say to both of them, look, people just like speaking to you. They're just curious to know who you are and what you're doing here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's nice, really, that people just want to say hello, don't they?
Have you found that you or the kids have changed in any way as a result of your moving to Australia experience?
The kids are so much more confident, aren't they?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be said for just taking kids out of their comfort zone, whatever that entails, so long as they're within that security net of we're still here and we're a family and we're pretty close knit. I think that they've grown in that way so much from just being taken out of their little sort of village school lifestyle where they know everybody and everybody knows them.
Yeah, it's almost like the opposite of what we learned through COVID, of like, if you keep people in a little bubble, then they probably grow more anxious and worried about change, whereas if they don't have a bubble to start with, then they just roll with it a little bit more. But that's been really nice to see with the children.
Yeah, and we've noticed it with our youngest as well, haven't we, that he's a lot different to how our older two were at the same age, and I think he's just got this same parents but a completely different style of upbringing, and he's so flexible and adaptable and easygoing, isn't he?
Yeah.
He doesn't mind where he is, and he will play with anything and anyone, won't he? He's just happy to be where he is, wherever he is, fine. And the other two would have been asking questions, or what are we doing now, and what's going to happen tomorrow, and what about this and what about that, whereas he just floats along, doesn't he?
I've found, that's one of the biggest motivations for me wanting to move to Australia as well, was I was seeing more and more in the UK of kids growing up in their rooms, glued to devices, and not really kind of ever living life. So it's great to hear, you with your kids, you've gone even that step further. I've noticed it with mine, just having a lot more of an outdoor lifestyle because of the weather and the way the infrastructure is set up. But I guess, if you really want your kids to not be on a device, here you go. I'm going to turn the Wi-Fi off, not because I can turn it off, but because there is no Wi-Fi. That's literally it. Oh, what are we going to do? All that outside, go and explore, but don't go anywhere near snakes. That's the ultimate experience, really, for a kid, I think. It's great to hear. Have you guys changed at all in any way, do you think?
I think one of our aims was to be slightly more relaxed and less stressed and less all of that, really. And I suppose the lifestyle helps. The weather, I think, genuinely helps your sort of well-being. But just the general culture and the life of living in Australia with Australians, who, like I said,
it's
are just
infectious,
so,
isn't it?
positive, laid back, and unjudgmental is something I really picked up. I feel like in the UK, you'd be worrying about, am I dressed correctly for this event? Are people going to say, oh, he looks a bit scruffy, or why is he dressed? People just, they don't care. They take you at face value. And I just think that's so nice, and it just makes for a much happier
It's just
and
a lot less
easier
pressure
life.
in every dimension, isn't there, here? And it's really hard to put your finger on until you're here, but as soon as you step off the airplane, it's palpable, isn't it? It's just like, exhale.
Yeah, and we're going back to the UK for Christmas, and I'm already anticipating potentially the opposite, and getting there and feeling suddenly a lot more stressed, or picking up on the stress of other people more than we have.
You'll definitely be colder.
Yes.
Do you have any regrets about anything you've done in your experiences so far in Australia?
I guess in black and white sort of practical terms, the regret would be settling down on the Sunshine Coast. Just because for the sake of 6 months it cost us a fortune. It was an experience, we've experienced that, and if we hadn't experienced it, we wouldn't know what it was, or if we were missing out, or what we had missed out on. So you can't really have regrets, can you?
No, it's funny because actually we hadn't even visited that part of the country ever. It was almost like, we'll do our research, let's see where looks good to live. And actually we've travelled loads since, and I still don't think we found a nicer area. So it's not that we didn't even get it right. It was just that we just weren't ready to settle at that point, I think. think.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd have done slightly differently?
Find a cheaper house.
Yeah,
I would say if you move over, find the cheapest, crappiest house that you can, because the lifestyle is what you're here for and not the house. And actually, there's going to be so many things you need to spend money on in the next year that you've not even anticipated yet.
I said the same thing to Sam.
Somebody else's mortgage. Like, it's not what you need.
Yeah, I said the same thing to Sam when she was quite oblivious to our whole move. It was just relying a lot on me to sort things out. And I remember when we were in hotel quarantine and we were looking at places of what could be affordable, what kind of areas could we live in. And I remember having to have the conversation, kind of set expectations in the sense that, you know, it was just me, her and Aurora at the time. And I said, look, I know we've got these grand plans of having people over and a nice place to accommodate people. But I said, right now, all we need realistically is 2 bedrooms and somewhere to cook and wash. And we were looking at some places that were, by Australian standards, very small, but by UK standards, not necessarily the smallest things in the world. And I said, look, these are really cheap. I'll try and find places that, you know, tick certain boxes. Like, you know, she wanted a pool potentially, you know, because it was coming into summer and she wanted to be cool. I was like, if we can find those, then great. But if this is the worst that we are able to get, what do you think? And she said to me, we're not going to be here forever. So it'll have to do for now. And I think that's a mentality thing. When people come here, they're like, oh, they see all these lovely things and they're like, I want that one. Because they've put their lives on hold for so long waiting for visas. And then it's now that chance of, I could have this now. And it's very difficult to say to people, can we just wait a little bit longer? Do we need it right now? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's great to hear that sometimes you need it to force you in other directions, like you've gone with your caravan. But yeah, if you're not wanting to go live in a caravan, I guess then maybe trying to find cheaper housing in the first instance might help.
Taking risks is you do get things wrong, but that's sort of part of the adventure and part of it anyway, really. The financial side is hard. That's probably why it's our biggest regret, because, yeah, other mistakes you can just roll with, but when it's money, you can't get that money back.
Yeah, it's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you make... To make a move as big as this, you make 1,000 different decisions and you're going to get some of them wrong. So that's just what it is. You can carry on in the life you've got and it will roll on and the bills get paid and everything kind of ticks along. But if you want to change things as much as this, some of it's going to go well and some of it won't go as well. And you've just got to work out which things you're willing to live without, really.
Is there anything that you didn't expect that you'd miss from living in Australia?
What did George say this morning? It's a particular cereal that isn't even that great of a cereal that he's been talking about for the last 12 months. I can't wait to get home at Christmas. I'm going to have some shapes, he calls them, doesn't he? Those like Cheerio multigrain. They're not even that
People
nice.
say that about things like Greggs and stuff though, don't they? Oh, I couldn't move away from the UK because of Greggs. I'm like, seriously? Have you never had an Aussie sausage roll for a start?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do miss like proper Chicago town pizza. You can probably get them here somewhere, but it's not the same.
Is there anything that would make you consider moving back to the UK?
Possibly. I think if things, I always worry, the worry in the back of my mind is something going wrong at home, family, like ill health or something really dramatic along those lines. I think I would really struggle with that, being here and not being able to be there and be with them and support them there. Other than that, I think in black and white terms, life is better here. But there's always that thing that the rest of your family is in England.
Yeah, I think from things that we miss, it is only the people, it feels like, friends and family, and it's whether that might get almost too much if we did decide to settle somewhere and then after a few years we thought actually we haven't made many friends or we're not getting that social thing. Maybe that
but I guess you'll never find out until you try.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I remember like when we were first talking about doing this and we decided it stupidly quickly, like within a couple of weeks of the idea coming up, we were applying for visas and we were doing it. But what we talked about was that life carries on at home the same. And I think when you live somewhere just like an established village with a village school and people are just there their whole lives, aren't they? And I know if we go back even another 5 years' time, the same people will be there living the same lives. So I don't know how we could ever regret this, really. Like, we go back in 2 or 3 years' time. Well, we've had a good 2 or 3 years in the meantime. It's money. That's the only thing. We'll have spent a lot of money in the meantime.
It's there to be spent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can't take it with us.
Yeah, well, exactly, I think.
What are the plans then for the future? I mean, short term, I guess you're going to continue traveling around Australia. There's a trip back to the UK in there. What are the plans for the future for Sean and Lucinda and the kids?
We don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
We're enjoying travelling at the moment. Oh, hang on, we've got some friends.
Do you want to say hello?
How are you finding living in a caravan, mate?
Good.
What's your favourite bit about it?
What's your favourite thing?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Oh, good.
Good show. Sylvie, do you want to say hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, come around here.
Stick your head round. What's the worst thing about
What's
living
the
in a
worst
caravan?
I
I'm sure you
can't
can answer
escape
that.
from George.
Yeah, that's my worst thing as well.
Yeah.
The car.
Long drives. Yeah,
Oh,
George
yeah.
doesn't like being in the car.
Yeah,
Fair
that is
enough.
a tricky part, isn't it?
George doesn't like sitting still, do you? It's a tricky one. You got any idea, Sylvia?
What would you say, Sylvia? What have we all learned? Do you think we act differently?
No.
No?
No.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, really.
I think I might know.
Go on.
It might be. The world isn't cold anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't need to be cold your whole life. I think my advice would be that if you kind of know that that's what you want, then just do it. Don't hang around asking all the fiddly questions because you probably can't find the answers yet anyway. You're not going to know until you've...
Yeah, there's that element of just push the button and then deal with the things as they come, really. Yeah, I suppose that's it, really. It's good to have the financial backup. I think that is important because it would be a real shame to get out here and then not be able to afford the life that you want or struggle. And we're lucky in that we are still renting our house in the UK and we've got supportive family where in an emergency we could say, please, can we borrow such an amount of money? I think without having that backup, it might be quite scary. But yeah, I think just if you're feeling brave and you want that, then it is going to be hard and you do have to take the leap of faith, but go for it and maybe weigh up what's the worst that can happen. Yeah.
It's all memories and life experience, isn't it? Whichever, however it goes. And you hear so many people who come, they say, oh God, it's all gone tits up. They go back. And then 5 years later, they come back again because they realise actually things went wrong, but we'd still want to be there. We still want to do it.
Thanks, Sean and Lucinda, for sharing your journey with us, and I hope it's given you all a greater insight in what it's like to move to Australia and live here, even if you're going to live in a caravan. If you want to see more of what their life is like, then make sure to follow their Instagram at Gray's Finding Freedom, or if you're looking for some additional support for your children and their learning, perhaps in the transition moving to Australia, or maybe just some extra help with their homework, check out Tailored Teaching, and I'll put links to all of those things down in the description below. And if you want to see more of what our life is like, then make sure to check out our channel at That Johnston Life, and please remember to subscribe because the larger we grow as a channel, the bigger and better guests we'll be able to get, sharing their journeys about moving to Australia for you. And if Australia is your next step, but you're not quite sure where to start, check out the sponsors of our podcast, True Blue Migration Services. Use their free assessment today to see what your visa options are for moving to this beautiful country. And I'll see you next time.